Hope for Anxiety and OCD, episode 38. On today's episode, I am talking with Monica McLaurine. See our show notes for spelling on that, about self-care. What in the world is self-care all about? You hear a lot of people talk about it. It's a big buzzword. And I feel like this episode is timely right now because people are coming back to their rate of busyness, maybe that they had before COVID. Hopefully not as busy, but getting back into routines and activities that we were doing prior to all of the shutting down and restrictions. More places are open and more activities are available. Monica is also going to talk with us a little bit at the end about some books that she's written and talks she's given on bullying. Monica, welcome to the show and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, hello, Carrie. Thanks for having me. My name is Monica McLaurine, and I am a certified life coach, and I'm also a two-time author of 2 books, and I also have some motivational speaking experience. So I am a lover of Christ and a follower of Christ, and I'm just excited to be here to talk with you on today.
I'm excited to have you on. I think we're going to have a good conversation today on self-care. So This is something that a lot of people are talking about. You know, it's a buzzword. Oh, you got to, take time for yourself. You got to have self-care. So how do you define that for people?
When I think about self-care, it's simply what it says. It's taking care of yourself. And most times people don't even realize that they're not taking care of themselves. They don't realize it. It comes in many forms. There's several different types of self-care, whether it's physical, that's where you may get out and take a walk or go sit under the stars at night, bird watching, whatever, it's just out and about. Or whether it's emotional, saying no, which is sometimes some things that I struggle with, saying no. Whether it's social. When I say social, this is one of the things that I really, really struggle with is asking for help. A lot of times we're, like myself, I'm just going to talk about myself. I am happy to help anybody else until, I just can't do anymore. And people will ask me, do you need some help with something? I'm like, no, I'm okay. I'm fine. I have it. So asking for help, that's a part of self, right? A lot of people are still working from home currently. So when you think about your environment, decluttering your office or your home, like that's a big thing. My sister-in-law, bless her heart, she is an organizational, very clean person. If things are in disarray, she can't tolerate it. It pushes her into anxiety. And also going along with that, when you think about professional self-care, if you're working from home, are you actually taking a lunch break? Are you actually taking a break? Oftentimes I'm guilty of going downstairs to get me something to eat, and then I turn around and come right back upstairs and I'm eating and I'm working. And so I don't take that mental break. And it's a necessity,
right?
For self-care. Or even if it's just spiritual, meditating. I just recently started meditating because I didn't understand it at first. Like, what is that? But just sitting still and allowing yourself to get in the process of being calm, because I do suffer from anxiety. So I had to try some different things to make sure that I took care of Monica. And
That's
meditation was part of that.
Just the concept of slowing things down. I think that's probably our biggest barrier to self-care, is learning how to hit the pause button. That was something essentially, in some ways, we had to do it during this time of pandemic and coronavirus. Things did have to slow down. What I'm seeing now is that like when we're recording this, we're approaching the summer and people are getting vaccinated and they're getting out more. And it's like, I turned to my husband like a week ago and was like, I feel like we're in pre-pandemic life. Like our calendar is actually filling up with stuff,
Yes.
and so
Yes.
it's an opportunity for us to have a conversation and to say, hey, where's our date night at on this calendar? Like we're running over here and doing something for church, and then we're doing something with our friends over here. Like we're married. This is important. This is priority. And so part of that, what you were talking about with the relationship and the social domain, like making sure that you have time for the people that are most important to you in your life.
Absolutely right.
Yeah. So
And we had to learn to do things a different way.
yes.
If you did a date night might not be out at a restaurant, but it might be in the backyard. Or if you like to go out with your friends and do a happy hour, you had to do it on Zoom. So you really had to learn to do things a different way.
Right. And those social connections, I think what this has taught us are so important for ourselves. Like we were made to live in community, and that's an important thing. I loved what you said there earlier about boundaries and saying no to things in order to take care of yourself. It's that whole, you've got to put on your own oxygen mask on the airplane before you put one on your child. And it's interesting to me that on the flights that I've been on, I haven't flown in a while, but the flights that I've been on, they come around and they look at each person. It's like a real serious thing. It's like, okay, now understand that you need to put on your own oxygen mask first.
Right, because you can't help anybody else until you help yourself first.
If you can't breathe, that's not a good situation. And so many times we find ourselves in the busyness or the rush of life, whether it's owning our own business or raising kids or serving at the church. And the next thing we know, we're like emotionally have no time to just sit and rest and breathe and reflect. For me, I know that those periods are what I need to get refueled and recharged to be able to go out and do the other things that I do, especially because I'm an introvert. So there's this balance.
Oh.
And we had a whole podcast on introversion. If y'all haven't listened to it, definitely go back and listen to it because I loved that one. That was one of my favorite. I just so identified with it, just needing the time away from people so that you can go back and engage, with others. It's really
at your own speed.
Yes, at your own space and your own speed. One thing I did in terms of boundaries recently for self-care, I'll just share a personal example. Mother's Day this year was really hard for me. I have a history of having foster children, and I wanted to go to church, but at the same time, I didn't want to be bawling all over the place and, snotting on everybody. So I kind of made this agreement with my husband because he was going to be greeting that day. And I said, hey, I'm going to come to church and I'm not going to greet with you and I'm not going to stay around and hang out after. I'm probably going to be pretty emotional. It's just a day where I think about, my foster children and missing them. And that's my context of being a mom since I don't have my own children. And this is kind of what I need. I need to just kind of go in right when service starts, sit in the service, get the word, get the worship, and then I need to leave. I don't need to kind of hang around and cry or anything like that because I know other people are going to be super happy and celebrating. And I certainly believe there's room in church for tears, don't get me wrong. But it's kind of just one of those situations where for me, that was what I needed, like to take care of myself was I needed to not be around people at that point. I needed to go to the car and get my tissues and cry and have a conversation with God and kind of finish up. That was my finishing of the worship service was in the car, and that's okay. And I didn't have to feel bad or guilty about that. Whereas I think in the past, I would have felt like, oh, I've got to feel happy because everybody else around me is happy. And I need to be really like celebrating moms and, you have a mother and you should be thankful you have a mother. I mean, there's so many conversations I think I would have had with myself in the past, but I just like created this space in this room to just have my feelings and take care of myself and do what I needed to do. And that was really the best fit for me.
Absolutely. And it's great that you realize that it's okay to feel like that.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of people, like you said, feel guilt or feel like you have to be a certain way. Everybody's entitled to how they feel.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you felt at the moment. And you empowered yourself to set those boundaries that allows
Right.
you to feel how you feel. And that's awesome. And it's great that you were able to do that for yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Why is this topic important for you personally? Is this something that have you struggled with burnout in the past or with not taking care of yourself?
Absolutely. I was always on the go, here, there. And then I was working and in my daytime job. I was all over the community, going to the office. I'm going over here to do this particular program. And then I'm fighting traffic to go to work. I'm fighting traffic to get home from work. I mean, there would be so many times that I would pull in front of my house and I would just sit there for like 20, 30 minutes. It's like I couldn't move. I was like exhausted. And one
Wow.
of the things that I realized that my body would get to the point where it's really sick of me. It's like, oh,
Mm.
okay, you won't slow down? Okay, I'm going to slow you down. And it shuts me down for like 2 weeks. I'll get bronchitis. I'll get like really sick. And why I have no other choice but to sit down. So if I can avoid that, I had to do something different in order to avoid that because I don't like being sick. I like being able to do what I want to do when I want to do it, right?
Right.
So it was very important for me, not only for my physical, it was important for my mental. I mean, just burning out, just exhausted, just getting to the point where I had nothing else to give. I was like, it's gotta be a different way. It's gotta
Right.
be a different way I can do this. And so that caused me to really look in to see what self-care really meant and what it involves.
I'm glad you brought up that physical aspect of illness because there was a lady that I worked with many, many years ago. She was in her 30s and she got shingles.
Oh,
And it was really due to stress because she was working 7 days a week. And our bodies, we have to listen to that. God
yes.
gives us these cues that when our bodies are run down, they'll let us know, like, oh, I just feel like I need to rest today, or I need to slow down, or I'm getting sick all the time, like you were saying. We've got to listen to those cues and signals of like a warning sign to take better care of ourselves.
Yes, shingles is very painful. I've had shingles. My mom has had shingles. It's a very painful experience to go through.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have enough hustle and bustle as it is. So why get yourself to the point where you're gonna add on where you get sick or you get shingles or your blood pressure goes up or
Yeah.
you have heart issues. We've got to learn to do things to take care of ourselves because if we don't take care of ourselves, who will?
Yeah.
And
No.
and ultimately, we can't take care of anybody else or be there for anybody else if we are not mentally, emotionally prepared and rested and whatever it takes to make sure we're getting that self-care that we need.
Right. One of the things that you and I talked about before we had you come on the show was that there's this concept maybe with males where they hear the word self-care and they're thinking about some women that are painting their nails or going and getting a pedicure. And tell us a little bit about that. Like, how do some of the men maybe that you work with or that practice self-care?
It's really funny that you asked me that because I guess a couple of months ago, I did an experiment on my Facebook page asking men, what do you do for self care? And the responses were all over the place. Some, they didn't really think about it. Like, what is self care? And then you had some where the guys were saying, well, that's for girls. That's not something that, we as men do. Then some talked about they like to go get a haircut or men like to get pedicures too.
Some of them do.
So some of them do. So I had a lot of people that said that. They said they go and work out or go play video games. But only a few said that they would take the time to go and talk to somebody about what they're going through.
Wow.
And that is kind of what I expected, but it makes me sad because everybody needs to vent. Everybody needs to talk through something with someone else. Everybody needs a confidant. A confidant. I don't care who you are.
Right.
And that is a part of self-care. All of that is a part of self-care. It is. It's in no way strictly for females. It's for everybody. And it really made me think. One, I had a suggestion just yesterday, that said, well, maybe we need to call it something else. So it doesn't seem like that's just for women. But it also makes me sad. I'm wondering if we as society has created an environment for men when they feel like they can't do certain things.
Right.
That, that emasculates them, that they shouldn't do certain things. Like I saw something today. They said, what kind of man goes to celebrate, has a birthday dinner? I'm like, what?
Yeah,
what?
just these I don't know, man-made expectations that we put on men. Like somehow you have to be a Superman.
Right. And when you think about it, and I have been fortunate and I'm honored that some guys feel like they can talk to me and they're going through something and they're frustrated. And of course, the life coach in me, and I'm trying to talk to them while they're going through, and then they're so in a zone where I realized I had to just stop and just listen. Let them, they will say, well, who are we supposed to go to talk to when we're going through something or when we're frustrated? What are we supposed to do? We don't have the opportunity, and they're so afraid that if they allow themselves to become vulnerable, that it will be brought up later and thrown in their face, So I wanted them to see the different options and what self-care looks like. And not only that, they're entitled to do it as a human being.
Sure.
And it's needed. It's okay to go to sit, I call it couch time, to go and sit on someone's couch and have a conversation and to talk to someone to help you think through it, because counseling is not anything for somebody to tell you what to do. It's to help you to work through it, to find out what's best for you. And I am very open about my experience of going and getting my couch time, going to therapy. That was the best thing I ever did in my life. And it amazed me because me sharing that I've done it, other people said, well, I went too, because it was almost like a shame in
Sure.
it. Mm-hmm. So I was like, yeah, I went too. And I've helped other people close to me, and I'll help you look for somebody. If you have insurance, it's just like getting insurance, in most cases. Find you somebody who may take your insurance, or even if, they don't, a lot of times they will work with you, or maybe offer some free sessions, anything. So just trying to get where their mind is, to get them thinking about what that is, and then not being afraid or ashamed to do it. So that the men, it has been interesting talking to them and listening to them and what their thoughts are, what they feel like society felt like. That's self-care is not for men. They should just be okay. They're man up, just do it. Mm-hmm. So it's pretty interesting.
Counseling can definitely be a part of self-care, for sure. Mental and emotional health. There's something about just saying it out loud. Sometimes all these things that you've been thinking in your head or that you're convinced of, and needing an outside perspective to say, I'm not so sure about that. What about this way? Have you thought about it, this way? Or, oh, I know you're convinced of that, but that's not how I see it when you tell it to me. You kind of say it back to them. Okay, so you're saying this. It's just interesting and can be really freeing. I know that there are things that come out when I either start talking about something or writing about that I didn't even realize consciously I was thinking.
Right.
It's just
Right.
all of a sudden it was like, oh, I guess I do. I guess I do feel angry about that now that I've said all that. I
Like,
didn't realize that was bothering me so bad.
right. Until you brought that up. Yeah. I don't like that either. Right.
Mhm. Yeah. So I know that sometimes Christians can push back against self care and say, okay, well, we're really supposed to care for other people, love one another. And that needs to be our primary focus. We've got to push this focusing on yourself. That's selfish. And we need to kind of shove that to the side. What would you say to that?
Yes. Like I mentioned earlier, it seems to be a stigma attached to self care and going to get help and saying that you need help. And I think it's unfortunate because I am a believer. I am a lover of Christ. I'm a follower of God. But I also believe that God allows and has placed people on this earth to also reach us on the earthly level. He allows us to access doctors. People have different specialties, and he allows that to happen, and he put those here for us to use them.
Right.
And it's not a bad thing. It is okay. It doesn't minimize your relationship with Christ. It doesn't say that you don't trust your belief, you don't trust your relationship with Christ. It has no negative relation to your belief or your relationship. So those things, they help. They gives you somebody that you can go and talk to that is completely safe. Whatever happens in there, unless you're talking about hurting yourself and somebody else,
Right.
is you gotta put that in there. It's a safe place. You don't have to worry about spilling everything and then going outside and your friends know what happened.
Right.
Right? When I went to my first therapy session, it's crazy because I went because I was encouraging someone else to go. And I was like, okay, well, if you go, I'll go. Right? So I go in with what I wanted to talk about and what I was going to discuss in there. And while I was in my first therapy session, I heard God speak to me clearly and said, she cannot help you unless you tell her everything. I heard him clearly when
Wow.
he said that to me.
That's huge.
So it was huge because things that I thought no longer were an issue or issues that I had in my childhood, all that had to come up.
Sure.
All of it had to come up. And I remember I was just in tears and I was just like, oh my God, how am I supposed to go to work after this? But you can't change what you don't acknowledge.
That's true.
And one of my favorite people, I say she's my mentor, but she doesn't know it and she doesn't even know I exist. Yeah, Iana Van Zant, where she said, feelings buried alive don't die, they fester.
Wow. Yes, that's true. It's true.
So I had to get all of that up because that affected how I was in adulthood, things that happened as a child. I
Right.
had to get that up. I had to get it out so I could deal with it, acknowledge that it was a problem. And now I can start my healing process.
That's awesome.
Right? So I think that was important for me to hear because, like I say, going to get therapy or sitting down talking to a life coach or any of that, or you don't have to worry about that being expressed or shared with anyone else. But my therapist, and I love her, she helped me talk through it. She helped me to see it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, this is what you're doing. If this is what you want to go and do in the future, how can you do it? And you're doing this and this. How can you have this and this? And how are these things going to help you get to what you're wanting to do in the future? And it helped me to map out, okay, well, maybe I need to cut something else out, or maybe I need to carve some time out for myself so I can think, or maybe I need to carve some time out to where I can't always go and take care of someone else, that I need to do some things for me in order so I can share those things with other people. And
Right.
the biggest thing I remember is just hearing God clearly say, she can't help you if you don't tell her everything.
Right. That's
So I
good.
felt like that was God giving me permission.
One of the things that I realized when I was looking at self-care in the Bible, I think it's the beginning of Mark, there's a point where everyone's trying to come to Jesus and they're trying to get healed. They're hearing about some of the miracles that he's doing. And he actually quietly slips away from the crowd and goes away to pray and to be with God. So there's this sense that Jesus even models for us times where people really needed him or wanted something from him. And he chose at that moment in time not to give it to them or not to continue to give until he got recharged, through prayer and through that connection with God. And I think that that's a great model and example for us. The other thing that I think about, and I wrote a blog post on self-care a while back. I don't know if I ever transitioned it over to the Hope for Anxiety and OCD blog, but I'll try to do that if I haven't already.
Okay.
It's on self-care, and I talked in there about, the second greatest commandment is love your neighbor as yourself. And if we don't love ourselves, what does that mean for our neighbor? Kind of thinking of it, the verse in reverse in a way.
Absolutely.
I know for me, the times in my life where I was the least gracious towards others, or I was the least forgiving towards other people or loving, I was also that way towards myself. It was like a mirror. And so the same thing's true for self-care. If I can speak kindly to myself, I can speak kindly to other people. Sometimes self-care begins in the mind in terms of what we put in our minds and what we receive in there. So that was just a couple of thoughts that I had kind of about Christianity and self-care. Let's talk about if people aren't engaging in self-care, maybe they're listening to this and they feel like they're living the life that you used to live, where they're just going all the time and doing everything for everybody and feel like they can't cut back. What are some small ways that people can start practicing self-care if they don't feel like they have a lot of time to do this? Because I think sometimes when I tell my clients, you need to start practicing self-care, they're like, I don't have time for that.
Yes. Yeah, I have one client in particular where we've been talking about that for a year, and it finally took her a minute to get it. But when I say to people who feel like they don't have time, the first thing is, and it might sound cliche, it's just to sit there and to breathe.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people, and myself included, I was like, I'm breathing already. What do you mean? Like, I'm breathing
I can
already. Breathe. What? I'm doing that next. But actually sitting there or laying there and purposely just hearing your breath, concentrate on your breath. It's kind of taking your mind away from what you may be dealing with, what you're going through. And like I said, I do have anxiety, and my trigger, my main trigger is anything medical. Okay, you can imagine going through the whole coronavirus thing, it affected my sleep, it affected everything. So the first thing is just to breathe. Just sit there and purposely breathe. Not thinking about anything else, just breathe. That helps me a lot with my anxiety as well. And then next, people feel like they don't have time, but sometimes just go for a 5-minute walk. 5 minutes. 5 minutes. Well, I'm not talking about walking from one building to the next at work. I'm talking about just go for just a brisk, not even a brisk walk, just a walk, and allow God to speak to you. I know sometimes when I haven't worked out in a while, I may be working out or walking and I just hear God speak to me. He's just speaking to me. I'm like, okay, hold on. I can't get it all. It allows me to clear my mind.
Right.
And just really question yourself when it comes to self-care. Think of yourself as worth it. You are worth taking 10, 15, 20 minutes a day. I don't care. Another thing I like to do, I have an adult coloring book.
Okay.
I have a coloring book. I'm not thinking about what I'm going through. I'm like, okay, well, what color am I going to color this flower? Or am I staying in between the lines? It helps me to get my focus on something else and away from something that could cause me to go into my anxiety attack or, causing me not to sleep. It's another calm down method. And there's several things that you can do to help you, whether it's decluttering, whether it's going to spend time with your friends and family, if they're a source of peace for you. It just find out what gives you your peace.
That's so good.
Everybody is worthy of peace, and everybody is worthy to take the time to get to your peace.
I had a client one time that said, I don't have time for all that self-care stuff. And this was an individual that was working 12 to 14-hour days. And I said, okay, I just want you to try one thing for me. Well, you see, when you get to work in the morning, will you just take 3 deep breaths before you get out of the car? And they agreed to do that. And sometimes when you start small, you'll see how it grows into something bigger. And maybe that might grow into that individual saying, hey, I'm actually going to take my lunch break today. I'm actually going to take my 30 minutes or an hour. And you may have to leave the property to get that lunch break. But if that's what you need to do, then that may be what you need to do.
If you need to take a break from social media, my personal Facebook page, that's mine. And most of you check it as something that's funny, something that you can laugh at. I'm sharing pictures of my niece and nephews, my family. My personal page, it's fun for me. And if stuff starts to get too bad, or I see something negative, or I feel like I'm taking in too much of something, I can turn away from it because I give myself permission for that because it can take me. It's just too much sometimes. People say, "Have you watched this movie?" I'm like, I can't handle that right now.
Right.
And you have to do it and know that it's okay. It's not girly. It's not, makes you feminine. It's something that you need for your emotional, physical, and your mental health. You have to do it. And it's like if I have something said, or whether it's writing something down, or it's my meditation, or if it's just sitting and doing nothing, I quite enjoy that.
Right.
Sitting there and not doing anything. I know that that's okay, and I know it's necessary. So just small little things, take a breath, go for a brisk walk, start journaling, do some meditation, visit with friends and family, whatever it is that can bring you some peace or center you. Start there.
And if you're looking for those pockets of time, you'll find them. I definitely believe that. We spend so much time on our phones scrolling through social media, and a lot of times that's not a good way to relax. It's almost a way to disconnect, I believe, from whatever's going on around us in the moment. But a lot of times it's too much input, it's too much stimulation and going on, especially before bed or things like that. We've got to watch out for that. And I definitely agree. Sometimes you just need to put the phone down, get off social media and say, okay, I'm going to go do something helpful and productive in my life right now that brings me peace and joy. So that's good.
Absolutely.
Tell us a little bit about your books and speaking opportunities that you're involved with.
Great. Thank you for that. As I stated earlier, I am a 2-time author. And it was interesting. My pastor spoke into me. I do a lot of things on bullying and social media and empowerment and self-esteem, things of that sort. And he was like, you should write a book about that. I was like, who, me? What? A book? Who am I to write a book? Right? On my first book, which is called Becoming Comfortable in My Own Skin, The Journey to Loving Me, it helped me to evaluate myself. It starts with me wanting to lose weight. And I saw a picture of myself and I just really wasn't happy with that. And I said, okay, well, maybe I have this medical condition and that can help me, give me a pill and it'll take care of it, right? And I was healthy as a lark and the problem lied within me. So I was working 2 jobs and I was working out 5 days a week. And during that time, you don't have a lot of time to do other things. But what I did have time for was to deal with Monica. I realized how I didn't love myself like I should, how I didn't even like looking at myself in the mirror because I didn't like what I saw. So during that time, it was not so much about losing the weight, but it's the discovery of myself at 38 years old. And while I was on that journey, I would share certain things, which I believe God led me to do. And I know he did because the inbox started coming. And people were just like, okay, well, what are you doing? Or how did you get through this? Or, there were a lot of people who never said anything, but would come up to me if they saw me in church and say, you're really doing a good job. Just there was a purpose behind that. So that was my first book, sharing my journey and what I did. And that's also a devotional at the end of it to help you to start new habits. They say 21 days, you create new habits, but I'm giving you a 30-day to put what in there, whether it is starting a new business, whether it's a weight loss journey, whatever it is. For 21 days, for 30 days, to start doing something to accomplish your goals. And I was embarrassed at first, but when we go through things, like we go through our testimony, our test is for our testimony, and that is to be shared.
Right.
So that my first book is my testimony, it is my journey. And then my second book is called, as I said earlier, I do a lot of things on bullying and social media. And while I would be out and about doing things, I would encounter a lot of parents who came up like I did. Somebody hit you, you hit them back, and so forth and so on. And the title of the book is called, I Told My Kid to Fight Back, and examining generational differences in bullying yesterday and today. Trying to let people know we cannot do or handle bullying or social media like we did when we were coming up.
Sure.
For one, we didn't have social media.
Right.
We didn't have those pressures. Thank God for that. And then, if you're telling your kid this, do you know that they can even defend themselves? Have you even talked to them about that? Do you know if they can defend yourself? And 99% of the time when I ask that question, they say, well, no, I don't know, but they got to learn. But when you're doing that, are you creating an environment where your kid may feel like they cannot come and talk to you? Because maybe they're not prepared. That was a mother who talked to me, and her daughter was getting bullied at school. And she was like, you need to start taking up for yourself. You need to fight back. You need to do this. And the daughter burst into tears. She was like, I don't know how.
Wow.
So I'm trying to show how things were when we were coming up and how things are now. And they're completely different. And you cannot handle them the same way. Right. Or if you want your kid to fight back, that's fine, but at least prepare them. Think about the repercussions, and even parents discipline their children. I talk about that in this book too. There was a particular young lady where her mom was disciplining her, and of course it went viral. I talked about that there were 3 red letters in the bottom of the video that I saw, and that was CNN, which is international news. Once something is out there on social media, on the internet, it is out there forever. So that is going to follow your child for the rest of their lives.
Right.
You got to be careful in how we do things. So doing my speeches and my programming around bullying and social media, that led me to write this particular book. So those are the 2 books that I'm really, really proud of. And They're both on Amazon in paperback and on Kindle. And you can get them on Amazon, or you can go to monicamclaurin.com.
Okay, and we can
purchase them there.
We can put the link in the show notes too to your website, so people can follow you there, or if they want to contact
Thank you so much for that.
Yeah.
Yes, and if they're interested in some life coaching sessions, they can also contact me at monicamclaurin.com there as well.
Okay.
We can set up some things. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my little trinkets.
Yeah. Right? So at the end of every podcast, since our name is Hope for Anxiety and OCD, I like to ask the guest to share a story of hope, which is a time where you received hope from God or another person.
I was really thinking about that question, and what comes to me is right before I started writing my book, I had been encouraged to write my book, and within 6 weeks, I had lost like 20 pounds, right? And I kept hearing from God, I need to share my story, share my story, share my story. Like I said, I was embarrassed, and I was also ashamed because I was never the best student. I was an A, B, C, D student all throughout my life. So share my story, write a book. I was my worst enemy. I kept doubting myself. But I believe that if God gives you the vision, he will qualify you to do what he asked you to do. And I believe I went through what I went through in order to share my story. The encouragement that I got from God is to share my story, which is what I started in doing my book, what I've started doing and sharing it on social media. I'm in the process of starting a Facebook group called My Anxiety and for the people who love me, to help people who are suffering from anxiety, and also help the people who love us who don't understand what anxiety is, how they can help us, sharing a good support system. So I'm in the process of putting information out there to share it, and I invite other people. I'm hoping, and hopefully I can invite you to that particular Facebook group, and you can share some things, some tips and things. So my whole thing was God allowed me to go through these things to be an inspiration and share my testimony to others. So even though I was my own self-worth, my own worst enemy and self-doubting myself, he encouraged me and created opportunities for me to do what he asked me to do. I pulled that together by saying, be your best cheerleader. Be your best, believe in yourself. Never give up on yourself, because where you started doesn't necessarily mean that's where you're going to end. Who would have thought that I would have written 2 books? Like I said, I wasn't a good student.
Wow.
I wasn't all of that. But when I stopped getting in my feelings, doubting myself, being my own worst enemy, I have accomplished and plan on accomplishing more than I ever thought I could by just allowing myself to be a vessel for God to use.
That's so
always
good.
Believe in yourself. Thank you. Always believe in yourself.
And believe in what God has called you to do. If I didn't believe that God really wanted me to do this podcast and spread these positive messages, I would have quit it a long time ago, because I can tell you that it's not always easy. And there's definitely been a lot of roadblocks, and it's been a huge learning curve for me along the way. But what the piece that's kept me going is really believing that God wants me on this path, and I will be on it as long as I feel like he's leading me to do that. And the day he says it's time for the podcast to go, the podcast will have to go. But I I really just kind of wanted to echo some of the things that you were saying about that. There's all kinds of things that we don't believe that we can do, but if God has called us to them and we have that spiritual confidence and assurance in our faith, then God will give us the tools that we need to be able to move forward and do those things that He's asked from us. So this has been
Absolutely. He will put you in the right position to get what you need in order to accomplish.
This has been a really great conversation on self-care and just some good encouragement at the end. So thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Thank you so much, Carrie, for having me. I appreciate you.
I hope this interview sparked some ideas about how you can better care for yourself. I want to say a special thank you today to two of our supporters on Buy Me a Coffee, Tony and David. If you aren't familiar with the Buy Me a Coffee website, this is a website similar to Patreon, if you've heard of that one, where people can go on and donate to podcasters and other creatives. There's a lot of time, energy, and yes, money that goes into hosting a podcast. So if you feel so inclined to donate, you are welcome to. And the link to that will be in our show notes. I am so thankful to God for His provision of resources to be able to do this podcast. Thank you for listening today. Hope for Anxiety and OCD is a production of By the Well Counseling in Smyrna, Tennessee. Our original music is by Brandon Mangrum, and audio editing was completed by Benjamin Bynum. Until next time, may you be comforted by God's great love for you.